Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I know that many of you are very concerned with California issues, especially considering who's running this state. The guy running this state might be running for president in 2028, but we've got a California state senator, or ex-California state senator now, who was the state Senate majority leader for the Democrats, believe it or not, from 2001 to 2010, and she's turned Republican. Her name is Gloria Romero. Gloria Romero, welcome on with us. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. Good to be with you, and of course, your followers and listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about maybe a couple or a few of the major reforms or the major pieces of legislation that you advocated for while you were at our state capitol. How about we start with education? What's a major piece of legislation you've pushed through?
Well, education has always been near and dear to my heart. And if anything, this was the one issue on which I ran that was just so strongly received by the people. The major piece of legislation that I did, it was basically to advance what was then called the Open Enrollment and Parent Empowerment Act. It basically gave parents who were trapped in state identified schools that have been chronically failing year after year to be able to pick up and move out of their zip code assigned failing school and find a school that fits their needs. It could be a any magnet school, it could be any neighborhood public school, it could be a charter school, it could be any one of those. But what it did was really profoundly enable parents who are assigned just by their address to a
Mm-hmm.
failing school and not allowed to leave by the bureaucrats in the law to pick up and move. So it was a major piece of school choice legislation. And then, of course, attached to that was what is called the Parent Trigger Law, very innovative, basically to allow parents, to basically turn around, transform their own school by having 50% plus one of the parents to get together, sign a petition, and just basically demand change, a turnaround. So those are pieces of legislation. There were, of course, other things that I did. I also enacted, I think, some significant prison reform, overhauling our prison system, because to me, education, if we don't educate, we will incarcerate.
And I completely agree with that. And it's interesting. It's really intriguing actually, because it's almost like, in a sense, a prelude to any parent's Bill of Rights that would have taken place after that. Or even in some of these red states these days, they're passing parents' Bill of Rights, where they're allowing parents to know if their kid is having a mental issue in the school. That includes if they're dealing with issues with their gender and they can't figure out what gender they are, and just those kinds of things. Parental notification has become a big issue, but with you, it was really making sure that every child gets an education. And in my case, I experienced a lot of kids coming in from different districts who were not previous, who lived in completely different areas. In fact, there's a school in my neighborhood. It's called Greer Elementary School. It's a very low rated school, and I was at a very high rated school in a good neighborhood, Sierra Oaks Elementary. Suddenly, one of the years that I was there, I noticed that there were a lot of kids transferring from the bad schools to the good schools because the parents figured that they would be getting a better education there. And that does really sound like a transformative piece of legislation. It sounds like, though, where your issue is at now is that your party has gone so far off the rails from those kinds of ideas and is going a completely different direction that you don't stand by. So if we could talk about that a little bit, that would be awesome.
Right. And, like I said, I come basically from a working class family. My parents were diehard Democrats. They were Democrats during the Depression. So, FDR was very important. JFK, of course, RFK. These were people that we grew up with and that we respected and highly regarded. But if I take a look at the Democratic Party today, it really doesn't resemble anything. It no longer represents the working people. It no longer represents the belief in the American dream. So it was really, I say, along with others like Leo Terrell and others who are Democrats, to say, we don't recognize the party left us. And in actuality, has been coming for quite some time. I left the legislature in 2010. So that was, 14 years ago.
Right.
And even back then, already I had always fought for educational rights. To me, education is the civil rights issue of our time. We need to have a good education to be able to access the American dream. And I saw, working in both the schools and the prisons, and having been a university professor on the east
Mm-hmm.
side of Los Angeles at Cal State LA, I saw what was happening where too many kids were graduating, doing all the right things from the area schools, the East Side schools, Garfield, Roosevelt, Lincoln, you name it, getting into my college classrooms and basically not being able to write, not being able to read, not being able to do college level work.
Yeah.
So it was an issue that I had dedicated myself to long ago. But even back then, in trying to get legislation passed, and a lot of it was defeated, it was largely my own party. It was the Democrats that were killing it. It was the teachers' unions that would kill this because education, sadly, even though we call it a public education system, it really has morphed into a public works program. And that means it's just jobs for the adults, paychecks, pensions, perks, take care of the adults, the kids be screwed. And
Right.
so, I found that it was really difficult to try to move legislation forward. The unions came after me when I ran for office in my last election, poured probably some $4 million against me to defeat me. And they basically will take on people who don't toe the party line of basically
Mm-hmm.
putting unions first. And that's sad because I do believe in unions. I'm the daughter of somebody who worked the railroads. I was a lifetime member of my own union, being a teacher in my own union, professor. But unions have clearly the executive boards, the leadership, not the rank and file, but the executive boards, they've really lost their way.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And even there are other Democrats. Donald Trump was once a Democrat. Elon Musk was once a Democrat. RFK as well, as you know. Many people
Tulsi
call them
Gabbard,
the
all of them, Leo Terrell, you name it. And once I made the decision to leave the party,
hmm
yeah, there are
right.
people who criticize me, but you'd be surprised how many reached out to me to say, you know what, they've been thinking about it as well, or congratulated me on the decision because I think they've seen that, I've been in it for the good fight. And it was time to walk away from a party that now represents, the wokest of the woke, basically one that has abdicated its responsibility
hmm
to working Americans. It's gone full elite, and it no longer represents any. And that's why today, even, we're seeing this whole sort of teeth gnashing and this analysis of what went wrong in the last election. Well,
Right.
look at your candidate, look at your program. That's what went wrong.
Exactly. And I think you said it all when you spoke about these people coming to college classes and being graduated from the high schools and not being literate. And California has one of the lowest literacy rates in the union. We spend the most per pupil. It's just like America. When we created the Department of Education, we started slowly slipping down this slope where essentially people were getting worse at reading, they were getting worse at arithmetic, they were getting worse at writing, even though we had more federal government collaboration with the states. And so that's why you have this talk about even going as far as getting rid of the Department of Education. And that proposal would actually involve the transference of a lot of the programs that are currently there to other departments, like the Department of Treasury or the Department of Health and Human Services. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that as a professor and as someone who's been in education, someone who's had experience educating students, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I support the abolition of this department for many of the reasons that you articulated. But make no doubt about it, just eliminating the federal Department of Education is not going to be the ultimate answer on getting our kids proficient in reading and mathematics. But
Right.
what it does is it returns the responsibility and the accountability to the states. Each of the 50 states to be able to educate its students and to be held responsible. And as well, it also makes it easier for parents to be able to make changes when they know who's accountable, their local school boards, their state officials, rather than some unnamed bureaucrat sitting in a huge building, in the case of California, 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. So it basically, sharpens the line. You get rid of the middleman overall. But California is in a serious crisis. You mentioned
Hmm.
some statistics in California. Overall, we're not doing good as a state, but it even gets worse when we take a look at the conditions for especially African American, Latino children. It's upward of 70% of African American children who are not proficient in reading. Also, it's about 63% for Latino children not proficient in reading. And there are many arguments, there are many issues to take a look at it, but we know what can be done. We can take a look at teacher accountability. We can take a look at meritocracy and just basically not just promote and retain people because they show up and they breathe and they have tenure. They have to do their job. There's training, there's looking at curriculum, there's a lot of issues involved. And putting money not into the privileges and the perks, but really putting money into the classroom. And that's where by cutting the string so that the California or any state official can't blame it on some unnamed bureaucrat in Washington and say they're the reason why, it brings it back home. And the state officials are the ones who are responsible then for the education of their children.
That's exactly right and very well articulated. It's like the Roe v. Wade issue with the abortion. They brought it back to the states. So if people want to change it, it's at the state level. And if people don't like what's going on, then the politicians at the state level are responsible for that. So now this is just the case with education. If we get rid of the Department of Education, people should go to their state and only go to their state if they have issues with the policies that they're seeing being implemented. And one of the things that was implemented by the governor is to make it so that local school boards don't have a say on the, I don't know if you've heard, but I'm sure you have. There are gender notification policies passing all over the state in different conservative pockets where school boards are voting in a policy which says, look, if a kid expresses their desire to have their pronouns changed or anything changed about them, socially, their figure, their dress, etc., then the parent has to know that. And at the state level, they're doing everything they can to block that. So would you give us your thoughts on that?
This is one where I think it's just absolutely insane. And, I believe in the rights of trans people.
Yeah.
I do believe, and there's a lot of issues, et cetera. I used to teach a course in my college, sex and gender. I'm wondering if I went back to the university today, I probably wouldn't be able to teach sex and gender any longer. So I'd be curious to see how it's being done now. Uh, but notification in a classroom, the children belong to the parents. And what the
Yes.
state of California has done is to encourage lying, to reward lying, to basically remove children, the confidence, the trust, to remove the parents' right to know. It is absolute madness. And I do think that those who have advocated for this extremism in taking away kids, basically saying we will change what is the essence of who you are, without telling your parents, it's absolutely incredulous, and they will pay a price. I think, Gavin Newsom, good luck. Well, with him trying to run for president 4 years from now, this guy is woker than woke. It will not be tolerated. I don't even think Californians want this guy around any longer. But these policies, you can be sensitive and inclusive of people with areas in which they feel, gender, et cetera, but you can't make these drastic changes overall and deny the parents and lie to the parents and take away their own children from these parents. That is just madness.
Absolutely. And I'm one of those people that's willing to understand the sensitivities of these children. But my philosophy has been what these school boards are saying, which is that let's let the parents work that out with the children. Let's let the parents have a say in that, the ultimate say at least. Because if they are experiencing something that, they really need to get off their chest, the parents can work through that with the kid. And then there's more trust being built within the family structure. And I believe that that's really important. Good relationships between parents and their children, and also parents and teachers. And as you just stated, the solution to education isn't just getting rid of these policies that Fox News or even Newsmax would be calling woke, but it's also implementing good solutions to help educate our children, like making them proficient in reading, making them proficient in arithmetic, making them proficient in writing by focusing on those things rather than focusing on the culture wars, which I think is really important. If the Republican Party focuses on that, they could have a better time getting educators, teachers, parents, and all the rest on their side.
Well, I wrote a recent opinion piece and it was in the Wall Street Journal. And I basically say, look, you know what? We have MAGA, we have MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. We now need MARA, which is Make America Read Again, because
Right.
reading is the gateway skill. If we can't read, we are not going to succeed in life. If you can't read, you're not going to be able to do even, mathematics, computation, etc. Reading is a necessary skill. And I think for the going forward, I think President Trump and the Republicans were very wise to focus on the issues that most affected Americans. It was again to the economy, it was inflation, it was immigration, but also touched upon the culture wars, including the removal of parents from any sanity when it comes to their children and how they're dealt with in the schools, especially on the issue of hiding them from their parents and threatening to taking them away, or all of the violence that we saw in the schools. I think these were the key issues that around which Americans voted for Trump. And Americans are very striped. This is a new rainbow coalition. The old Democratic Party, it's dead, it's gone. And I wonder to some extent, are we seeing the last remnants of the Democratic Party? Nobody remembers the Whig Party from days past, you know.
Right.
So I think to a large extent, the Democrats are running around, like I said, gnashing their teeth, trying to figure it out. If you have people like AOC and Gavin Newsom stepping forward, Kamala Harris as well, wanting to stay in the mix. Welcome. You're just going to lose again because they have not learned the lesson. But I do think it is a significant turning of the page, dare I say, with respect to history and what the Democratic Party has meant. I think it's a party that probably cannot come back to what it once was. But I will say that the Republican Party, like I ended up leaving the Democratic Party, joining the Republican Party. But I will
Right.
tell you, I joined the Republican Party because of President Trump, because it was a blue collar billionaire that built a new coalition. I could not have imagined becoming a Republican under Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan or, one of the other
Mm-mm.
guys.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. But this is a very different America first, an emphasis on the plight, but the promise of the working class and working Americans in this country, and putting America first and taking care of our issues without calling us deplorable and garbage and all that other stuff that was thrown at us. And so that's why I think this is important. And as long as this MAGA movement continues, and I believe in choosing JD Vance as his vice president, I think that the MAGA agenda, the America First agenda, will be in good hands going forward into 2028 and beyond.
I love that, Mara, especially because I have a philosophy teacher who cited statistics that show as well that if you are at a lower reading level, you have a higher probability of committing crime or being incarcerated or dealing with the justice system later on in your life, rather than making your own living, making ends meet, and making money. And that's another interesting thing. You just said turn the page. That was something that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz kept mentioning at their rallies about we need to turn the page on Donald Trump. And the American people just weren't buying it. But now, just like Nixon back in the day, he lost the 1960 presidential election against JFK. Then he decided to run for governor in California in 62, another failed run until he won for president in 68. What do you make of Kamala Harris potentially trying to run for governor of California in 2026? Does it look like a winning candidacy?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I think what she could do at the national level and will not be able to do at the national level, sadly, she might be able to do at the at California level because of the of still of the entrenched woke politics, etc. But I
Yeah.
don't think it will be just a clearing of the slate. I think she would be given a clear run for her money. You'll still have all the major media lined up to support her. But one thing that may stand out that might be very different is even the revolt of the donor class. A lot of people, many donors are just angry, as they should be, as everybody who even contributed to the campaign. I mean, she spent, as we take a look at it now, almost $2 billion from the money that was transferred in, the money that was raised, and lost spectacularly. I mean, it is unbelievable how she blew that money. One donor, I didn't know who he was, but apparently he is a mega donor, a very big individual, actually went on much of the news and just blasted her and the campaign, saying they knew not what they were doing, complete incompetence. And I think it has shown that even with all that money, sometimes if you have a bad candidate, and a losing message, I don't care how much money you have, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I wouldn't write her out, but it will not be the coronation that she expected when they pushed out in a political coup right in front of all of our eyes in the world, when they pushed out, bad Biden and installed her, just thinking we would sit down, shut up, swallow it, and vote. That was one of the times actually when I began to look at it. And when I finally decided to leave the Democratic Party, just saying, this is not democracy. As bad as Joe Biden was, what we saw was the Democrats in a backroom deal basically just wipe out 14 million votes in front of our eyes and just told us, here is our candidate. Like in Latin America, we call it the
Hmm.
lasso, here it is. We point our finger and say, you're the candidate, basically take it. And that was the expectation, that we were just going to roll over and support her. And there was the resistance. And many of us left the party at that time just saying, no, not me. This is not what democracy looks like from the so-called party of democracy.
Right. And it's exactly what you said. People, they thought people were just going to get bullied. They were going to roll over. And I look at politics as analogous to a marriage. When a country puts a leader in there for 4 to 8 years, they are married to that leader. It's like when you marry someone, you have to financially plan, you have to budget, you have to figure out how everything's going to work in the marriage. But that's not everything. The financial planning isn't everything. So it's important, but it isn't everything. So that's what got caught up in that's what the Kamala HQ got caught up with, was the finances are everything. We can pay all these celebrities, we can bring them in, they can perform, they can drag people to our rallies, and we're fine. We will win just with the finances, but it didn't work that way. And honestly, I want you to maybe comment on the financing that's going on in the state of California currently, because her management of that money is a testament of the way that she would probably manage California given a $300 billion or something budget. And currently, what we're finding is $24 billion waste with the homelessness, a different way of trying to fabricate a deficit that looks much lower than what it actually is initially projected to be by the Legislative Analyst Office. So, could you give your thoughts on what's led us to get to that point where where they're now predicting deficits over several years?
When I was in the legislature, there was always this adage that all of us would, discuss. And we would say, when you think about policy, the most important policy document, it's your budget. Because your budget lays out your priorities and your budget holds you accountable for what you are supposedly delivering. And so if you can't deliver on a budget, if you don't understand a budget, if you outspend your budget, then you really cannot manage a state. You can't manage a campaign. You shouldn't be trusted. I mean, think about it. All of us at home, we have to balance our paycheck, our bank books. We've got to pay our rent or our mortgage. We've got to pay our car payment. You can't just say, oops, you know what, I overspent, come back later on. So I think that people are looking at her, in addition to being very weak on understanding economy, inflation, immigration, what an open border, a lawless border has meant to rising crime and insecurity in California. I think people will look at her as she doesn't know how to manage a state. Why would we do that? Why would we go further into debt? And California is in debt and even made further into debt by some of the propositions and the bond measures that were on the November ballot this time around. So I don't think she'll have an easy run. She may be challenged for this. I think it'll be tough. I think that there are going to be some credible Republican candidates that will be looking at this as well, but it will not be the coronation that she expects, and nor should it ever have
Right.
been anything. These are our most important leaders, whether it's the presidency or our governors, and nobody should just walk in and feel like I'm going to be anointed. Everybody else move aside.
And I noticed that when she first ran for attorney general, coming off the back end of, or she was still, the prosecutor for San Francisco, she didn't win by a landslide. She barely won. She had like 49 point. She had like a plurality of the vote. I don't even recall her having a majority. She had a plurality. She won, and she became the next attorney general. And then the guy that was trailing behind her wasn't even trailing behind by 1%, and he was a Republican. So we already can see signs that she's not popular. And if she gets elected, it's not going to be the massive landslide that she expects it to be. We have a lot of liabilities. We have like pension debt, we have CalPERS, et cetera. And one thing that has concerned me is I've talked to gubernatorial candidates, and not all of them know our issues with CalPERS and our unfunded liabilities. So how are they still able to hide these things? And how do you think they're going to go about addressing these things? Or are they just kicking the can down the road for the future generations?
A lot of it is just kicking the can. A lot of it is obscuring stuff. If you look at a lot of the bond measures that are on the ballots, I think they're written in ways. Remember, it's the Attorney General that writes. Mostly these are deceiving titles for the bond measures to make
Right.
it sound good. Remember, it was Kamala Harris who is the one who wrote the summary for then Proposition 47 that led to the voters this time around rejecting it and basically forwarding and voting for Prop 36 to restore some sanity to the arrest and prosecution of crimes in California. So a lot of it is, wordsmithing and changing it. It really is a very deceptive practice when you look at it. And that's why we do have to get people in who are smart on the issues, but are also honest and truthful. Transparency matters. I'd like to see major changes in how we put forth how propositions are worded, summary sheets, because to a large extent, when you get that information ballot that is mailed out to every voter in California, it's largely legalese. It's really not in a form that you can
Right.
understand for the most part. And I really think there needs to be different ways in which we can provide for greater clarity on what this means, along with balance sheets. Like if you vote for this is the amount of debt you're basically passing on to your kid and your grandkid for the next, 20, 50 years. We don't know that. We just say, oh, it sounds good. I want clean water. I want safe schools. I want. And there never is, and this is how you're going to pay for it. And I really think there needs to be that because I think if that were the case, many Californians would want to understand that and be responsible. I just think that the format by which we get our election news and balloting, it is like they're like fairy tales and everything is like manna from heaven and it just sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. We decades ago gave the attorney general the power to be able to write to write the descriptions and titles for these propositions. I think we monopolize that power far too much, and maybe the people will have to overturn it. But there's a lady that I'm talking to, and she's dealing with juvenile offender law, especially because she had a son that had died to some form of gang violence. He was never involved in a gang, but a gang had mistaken him for a person that was in a rival gang, and he was shot in the back. And she realized that our juvenile offender law in California allows for people who've committed crimes like murder or rape or murder and rape coupled together before they were 26 to be let out. There's no life without parole for them. They're allowed to be let out on parole. And so she's very disillusioned by that. And she actually wants to pass a proposition and coming to realize that the attorney general is the one that gets to write the description for that and write a very biased description, potentially against it, is making her disillusioned with the way that our state government is run.
Most people don't know who the Attorney General is, but to a large extent, it's basically the people's lawyer. But when you look at it, that position hardly functions for the people. If anything, that person functions for the special interests, the one who have donated. Even when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General, I was absolutely dismayed. Education has been what I have fought for. And you might know about a case that was brought forth. This was actually a suit that was brought forth by children in California and parents. It was called the Vergara lawsuit. And basically, they were looking for transitioning, changing, reforming, improving schools up and down California by making sensible changes to teacher tenure laws and a number of other factors involved. They were all reasonable. None of these could ever get through the legislature by votes because the unions would always kill them. So they took it to court and they prevailed in the lower courts in Los Angeles. Well, guess what? The teachers union wasn't very happy about that. So of course they went to Kamala Harris, who was the attorney general, wanting to run for the Senate in her next move. And she basically attached herself to the hip of the California Teachers Association and filed to have the children's victory overturned at the California Supreme Court. And it was overturned. So
Of
this is
course.
what she did. But in the meantime, there she had been, talking about what a tough prosecutor she was. This is the same quote unquote prosecutor who was looking to jail poor mothers, mostly African American, Latina women, mothers, who are actually for not sending their kids to school continuously, often in failed schools, that then Kamala Harris said, and furthermore, I'm not going to let you change these schools for the better. So her record was horrific. But that attorney general position is so important. And sadly, the one we have now, it's just again too, he's looking at it as a hopeful stepping stone so that he could become
Right.
basically a short Gavin Newsom, but with the same ridiculous policies of his predecessor. That's what they do. And what we need is a real transformation of not only the governor, the lieutenant governor, all of these elected positions overall. So I think 2026 will be interesting. I'm looking forward to, seeing a very strong slate, a new way of thinking about California, and we'll see. So Kamala Harris, it's not locked in. There's no coronation going on.
Thank you, Gloria. And I think that was actually an excellent way to wrap this up. So, Rob Bonta looks like he's going to be suing Donald Trump a lot during the next administration. And as you said, he's eyeing the governor spot. So he's not particularly concerned with what's going on with the people, but is concerned with political lawfare that will result him in getting a promotion in some way, shape, or form. Gloria, I wanted to thank you for being with us today and sharing your thoughts on all these issues. It's been a tremendous conversation.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your leadership and really as a young person, really standing up and fighting the good fight from such a young age. We need, and we've seen the power of young people in this last election. It can only be more powerful going forward.
Thank you so much, Gloria, and you have a fantastic day.
You too.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.